Welcome to the Nerdthusiast Music Podcast, where today we're going to be discussing Prince. On the show, we have a whole panel of people. With me, as always, is John. John, welcome back. You had a little bit of a hiatus there. We've had some issues recording, if you guys haven't noticed, but we are getting back on track with our music stuff now. So, John, welcome back.
It's great to be back. Thanks, Matt.
No problem. John, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at SloopJ232 and on Instagram at SloopJohn232.
Frank, your second appearance here on the music podcast. You did our interview with Lil Maceo. Welcome back to the show.
Absolutely. So third appearance, you forgot my Led Zeppelin one.
Oh, I did forget Led Zeppelin. It is number 3.
See, that's what we're here for, Matt. All good, but both of them were awesome. Enjoyed being on.
Heck yeah. Frank, where can people find you?
On Twitter at FLD15.
And for his second appearance, Wes, welcome back to the show. You were on here with Lil Maceo before, and we discussed some Prince then, and yet we're talking about Prince again, so
here I am, man. Here I am. Told you it's one of the two favorite things I like talking about.
This will be a Wes-heavy episode for sure. And Wes, where can people find you at?
You can find me on Instagram at Grendel5XBX.
Wes, that would have been a great time to say, I've changed my name from Wes to a symbol right there. That would have been perfect. That would have been
the artist,
just spot on.
The artist formerly known as Wes.
There you go. That would have been just perfect.
Would you be on like the platform formerly known as Instagram? What would you be on, like MySpace or something? Is that where you'd have to
Real quick sidebar. I remember in WCW back in the day when they changed Prince Iakea's name to the artist formerly known as Prince Iakeia.
Nice.
Jesus. Which outlet was that? Was that WCW?
That was WCW. That was
like some WCW.
Bad. we always say there was good WCW and then there was bad WCW. That was part of the bad WCW.
As soon as you said it, I knew it had to be them. I would have bet my life on it. I'm Matt. You guys can follow me on Twitter at FromNJ2CA. The 2 is a number 2. Before we get started, I just want to mention, if you guys like what you hear today, please consider supporting us over on Patreon, patreon.com/Nerdthusiast. You guys can donate as little as $1 a month. Everything you guys donate over there goes right back into making our shows bigger and better, provides us with equipment, and you can get ad-free early access to our shows, exclusive episodes, all sorts of stuff. So please consider supporting us over there. We definitely appreciate it. Just like you, Juan. Juan, shout out to you. Thank you for your support this month. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
All right, guys, let's hop into the show. Prince Rogers Nelson. Interesting name, but a king amongst kings, or a prince amongst princes, I suppose. Prince made 42 studio albums before his passing, because we say that because they're still going to be releasing his music, where he has a vault of content that'll be coming out throughout the years. But 42 studio albums, I can't even comprehend. Like, most bands don't even make like 10 or 15. 42.
That's a lot. That's a lot of albums.
And you're talking an individual who did most of it himself too. So it's not just like, bands, obviously most of them are 3, 4, 5, several people. You're talking an individual who did all that.
And when you really think about it, 42, and again, yeah, like you just mentioned, that number is going to grow. It's probably close to 100, if we're being honest. That vault, who knows how much stuff is in there.
Well, I know there was always this big rumor that his vault held so much music that he can release an album a year for the next 30 years.
I believe it. No, I completely believe it.
That's a lot of music.
I mean, Paisley Park was very active there, man. Very active.
So he made 42 studio albums. He has, as Wes just mentioned, potentially a new album every year for the next 30 years, which is an insane amount of music. But the guy was a musical genius. Frank, you kind of alluded to this earlier. I can't remember the exact number. How many instruments did you mention?
I think it was 32, somewhere in that ballpark, 24, 30. I remember seeing that a long time ago, and I was just amazed. And I found out that on some of his albums, he actually went back and did every track. And I know Wes knows from being
Mhm.
a big time
Yeah.
fan, but he did every track with several instruments on albums by himself, which to me is amazing. I mean, and I know when we did the Lil Maceo piece, Lil Maceo was like, when people in the band were, playing for him, he'd be like, no, 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 I want it to sound like this. And then he'd grab the instrument and do it himself. I was like, that's just tremendous talent. Like you think about that, that just amazes me more than anything. And I'm a huge fan, but that alone amazes me.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where there's like drummers that will tell you that the two best drummers they've ever listened to are Prince and Stevie Wonder. And they're not people that are, associated with
Wow.
that instrument, but they just understand music so well that, they're savants.
Yeah, because you figure his early albums, he would go and record each instrument, and then on the second track, record a totally different instrument. I mean, that's incredible. And then all the vocals, all the background vocals, that's insane.
And at that point too, he was very young. It wasn't
Mhm.
like he was a 20 plus year musician. Like, a lot of guys learn an instrument later on, they might learn something else or, adjust over their career. He was a teenager and
Mhm.
early 20s when he did this. I
Yep.
mean, we're talking, young, obviously, early in his career.
Prince was like truly, truly an original. Um, I mean, the '80s when Prince really like hit the scene, it was tons of excess. The '80s was a different time. It wasn't as geared towards musicianship. That had kind of, I was just talking about Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder in the '80s was a former shell of himself. It wasn't everybody was just kind of synth rock. I mean, Prince was obviously into that, but there's Prince just displaying musicianship at
Mhm.
like a whole other level and really bringing appreciation to musicianship.
I think his sound was very unique too. I mean, you know, uh, and you guys know I DJ'd a lot in the 80s, and certain individuals and groups stuck out as having their, like, listen, everybody had their own sound, but a lot of those sounds grouped pretty comfortably. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There was dance music that kind of grouped comfortably. There was some, new wave type music that went comfortably. There was certain groups and certain individuals that I thought were just unique, and I thought, me personally, unique. Prince was one of those. I thought Earth, Wind, and Fire was one of those where they had their own sound. You'd hear them in different genres, but they had their own sound. And as an individual, I think Prince was probably the most unique '80s. You can call it what you want, dance music, whatever. But he had his own unique sound. There was nothing really close to it, in my opinion.
No, he wore his influences on his sleeve. He was very proud of his influences, but
Absolutely.
it was his own sound. It was 100% his own sound. You can hear it. Even when you listen to pieces of music that I'm sure we'll talk about, like songs that were written by Prince, made famous by other people. You hear them and you
Mhm.
go, "Oh, that sounds like a Prince song." Oh, why? Oh, Prince wrote it.
Yeah.
Like, because you can hear it. You can hear it. There's
Yeah.
a cadence to Prince's music that you don't hear in other things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. His music, it's you can definitely identify it. Like as soon as you say it, you're like, oh, I get it. That's Prince. Like the first time someone told me on Bad, they were like, oh, the guitar on Bad for Michael Jackson, like the song Bad, is Eddie Vedder or not Eddie Vedder. Oh my God,
Eddie Van Halen.
Eddie.
Eddie Van Halen.
Don't make me
I
come
had
through this
a drink
computer and punch
before
you.
the show.
So I realized who the fourth person that has to leave now is. So
Eddie Vedder.
Eddie
Don't
Van
confuse
Halen.
the
I'm
great one.
sorry.
Don't confuse the great one, the great Eddie Van Halen with Eddie Vedder. Anyway,
I
yeah,
like
but you could,
Eddie Vedder a lot. It's definitely.
as soon as you hear
that wasn't an Eddie Vedder cut down, was it, John?
Oh yes, I like McDonald's too.
Really?
He doesn't like Pearl Jam.
Wow, I didn't. You know what?
Me and him disagree.
We're gonna have to do a whole nother show on that then, because I'm a Pearl Jam fan. So
yeah, I call them McDonald's.
I'm a Van Halen fan too, though. So I mean,
anyway,
Van Halen.
Anyway,
Eddie Van Halen played the guitar track on that. As soon as somebody points it out to you, it's like, oh, of course that's Eddie Van Halen. It has to be.
Of course.
Yeah.
You're either like it's either oh, this is Eddie Van Halen, or this is somebody doing a really good job doing a Eddie Van Halen knockoff. And no, but that's the same thing with Prince. I'll bring up one of the songs that I'm thinking of. Obviously, Manic Monday, which the Bangles made a huge, massive hit. I remember when I found out that was written by Prince, and now most people when they hear that are like, "Oh, really? That's crazy." Me, I was like, "Oh, that makes
sense.
complete sense. I can hear it. I can hear the Prince. Like it's his cadence." So it's like either when you heard it, it would have either been one of two things. It would either been the Bangles being like, "Let's make a song that sounds like Prince," or Prince wrote it for him, which is clearly what happened. And then finally, that was one of the first Vault releases was the Prince studio version of Manic Monday, which never saw the light of day. And what's crazy about the Prince stuff from that Vault, which I always find amazing, is that you could be a Prince bootleg completist, and there's going to be stuff that comes out of that Vault that you've never heard before, and that doesn't happen in a lot of fandoms. Normally, it's like somebody can get their hands on something. That Prince Manic Monday was nowhere to be found. That was like Christmas that was like Christmas for me when that dropped.
Yeah, I haven't heard that version by his version of the song yet. I'll have to go check that out.
It's
awesome.
It's the same, but it's different because you have him singing it.
I'm sure he throws some of those high-pitched little screams in there and stuff.
It's awesome because he's like he'd write these songs for people, and you're like, and they're mega hits, and you're like, man, Prince is such a nice guy. He was like, oh, I don't need it. Like that would have been a huge hit.
I'm sure he got a couple dollars out of it. Yeah, I'm sure he got a few dollars.
He got a lot of royalties. He got a lot of royalties.
So Wes, earlier we were talking about Prince's music, and you were mentioning that he has this ability to turn anything into a song. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it just kind of goes to show his musical genius. I know a few examples that pop to mind. He has someone bet him that he couldn't turn just random words into a song, and he took that challenge, and so they threw the words la 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 he. He takes those words, he goes in the studio, out comes that song, a full song, which turns out to be the B-side on Sign of the Times.
Nice.
La 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 he. And then To Whom It May Concern, it's a full-fledged song promoting his Love Symbol album, but it's a full song. It's crazy. It's crazy. And then another one that pops into my mind, on the Sign of the Times album, there was a song called Starfish and Coffee, which someone was talking to him about a little girl that had autism before they diagnosed it at autism. And, she would go around saying starfish and pee-pee. So he took that and changed that, the ending to coffee. But the song is about this girl, this story he heard about this little autistic girl. So, like I said, just to take the ability to take random things and turn them into a song, that's genius. That's total genius.
It is genius, and that's one of the things that separates Prince from a lot of people, is that we already talked about his musicianship, but man, he was a great songwriter. And that's not always that they don't always go hand in hand. You have some people who are great songwriters, aren't much of musicians, and then vice versa. You have people that are these classically trained musicians, and they couldn't come up with a melody if their life depended on it. Prince could just understood melody, just understood, and good lyricist too. I mean, the guy was just all around anything pertaining to music. He just really understood. So I can
Total
see how
package.
he could just come up with anything. I made breakfast today, and there he is writing a song.
Writing a song about breakfast,
and it's a hit.
I mean, breakfast is the best meal of the day, so
it is. More so. I bet you there's more songs written about breakfast than any other meal of the day.
Oh yeah,
I think that's a given. Yeah,
I'm gonna look that up this week. That's gonna be
probably.
I bet you there
exist.
That's your job.
I bet you they're all like sexual too, like pancakes and waffles, but like all sexualized.
Legs and eggs. There you go.
Stick to you like maple syrup.
That's our next podcast. We're gonna do sexual breakfast songs.
Food breakfast innuendo.
Breakfast innuendos. Nice.
Yeah. I think we're onto something. Everybody loves to talk about food, so this might be the next show.
Here we go.
Let's talk about Prince's earliest days. So I wasn't aware of this. I'm learning new stuff all the time. I didn't know a lot about Prince going into this, but he started out in a band called 94th East. What can you guys tell me about that band? Because I know very little about it.
All I know they did one CD. It was a local band, and he played, backup instruments for this group. But once he blew up and became super popular, of course, everybody tried to go back and find anything that he's attached to, and put this out. Found this and put it out. The album is early 70s, I guess, the group, or late 70s when the group formed. So it's really early stuff.
His debut record was what, 78?
78.
It's like 78.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he had Prince kind of had when he hit, it was one of those things, like he was considered to be like one of the more exciting artists of the late 70s. It took a few years before mainstream really caught on, but Prince was already a draw, as far as attention in the music world by the late, when he first hit the scene in the late 70s. It didn't take him long to find an audience.
No, I definitely agree. Once he hit, he found that niche, and people just kind of gravitated towards him. But not everybody, I guess, understood him or liked it. Like when he was booed off the stage when he opened up for the Rolling Stones. Who would this Prince? But I know it's a different crowd.
No, but it's not even that. It was also the climate we were in the early 80s. It was a different time. It wasn't. I mean, if Prince opens for the Stones in the 60s and 70s, he doesn't get booed off the stage. There was that crossover with like you'd find James Brown on a bill with the Rolling Stones and it would go over well. But the early 80s were a weird time. It was almost like we had like reverse segregation again. Like it was weird. It was a weird time, and Prince kind of broke that down. Prince was a big part of breaking that down. Obviously, Michael was a part of that. Rick James was another, even though he was kind of shut out. But it was a different time, and Prince was kind of a very, very big part of breaking that mold, that wall that was kind of like put up again.
Yeah, as someone who grew up in the 80s myself, there was definitely a kind of a segregation, and I never really thought about it as much until you bring it up, but there was definitely some music segregation to some degree, whereas prior and after there was definitely more kind of combination of things. You had your stuff earlier, your events where it was love and peace in the 60s, and and then later on, much later, you had your events where you had all different types of musical groups playing together, like Live Aid and things like that. So, but in between, there was definitely some splitting. There was definitely
Yeah,
some segregation for sure.
It was almost like we took. It was almost like. I mean, I always say that we kind of. I don't want to get on my soapbox here, but we tend to move slowly as a society, but at least we move forward. But there are times when we take steps back, and I would think the late '70s,
For
early
sure.
'80s, we definitely took a step back as a culture, and thankfully we had artists like Prince that kind of would eventually transcend that.
Bridge the gap a little bit, for sure.
Yeah, so his first record came out '78, the For You record, which
Mhm.
which like I said, it did find an audience. There were people that were into it, but his next record is self-titled. That goes to like 20 on the charts, which for an album, for a second record, that's pretty impressive during that time.
And how old was he at that point? He was 19,
21,
20, 21.
21.
Yeah. So I was to say he was still obviously a very young guy at that point.
I can't imagine being popular like that at 21. Like that's insane.
No.
He had like the
Matt, at
world at his
21,
fingertips.
you were sleeping on my couch at 21.
I probably was. I'm pretty
You
sure I
were.
was.
You were sleeping on my couch at
Maybe not
21.
21. I might have been earlier. I think I might have been like 20 or 19. I don't know.
All right.
I
Well,
was young.
you know the point. The point. You know the point.
It wasn't
It
far
was
off,
21
Matt.
when you were
One
sleeping
way or
on
the
my
other.
couch. That's what it was. But you. But
Yeah, I mean,
my point
I
is,
could have
okay,
been Prince, make a bunch of like hit records, and we're asleep on John's couch. I just chose to sleep on John's couch. I don't understand what the problem is.
And there was some merit to that. John had a nice couch, so
An interesting sidebar on that. So Matt's nickname was the guy on the couch. Matt is still in my phone 20 years later as
Nice.
the guy on the couch.
Let me call the guy on the couch.
Because my SIM
That's only
card,
because you didn't
I
know
just
my
never
name for like
changed it.
months, and you just like whatever. That'll just be your name for a while.
And I just never changed it. Yeah, like, well, what's the point? It's fine. I know how to search for him. The guy. Yeah, there you
It's
are.
all right. I don't think I knew your first name for like 3 years. I always called you by your last name. So, you were Jonathan. Who's
I know a lot
John?
of people. I know a lot of people like that. I know a lot of people like that. People from college that are like, "Wait, I never knew your first name the entire time we went to college."
Everybody called you Brenner. That's why. Not a, I don't. I never heard anytime somebody called you John. I'm like, who? What?
Yeah, my mom
So
calls
weird.
me John. That's it. Actually, my mom doesn't even call me John. My mom calls me Patrick. She always calls me, my brother, the wrong name. She calls him John and she calls me Patrick. So she doesn't even call me John. So the self-titled hits. Self-titled did pretty well. Self-titled did pretty well. And then he put out Dirty Mind, which didn't do as well as his self-titled. It was the next record.
Man, that was that was like my favorite album, Dirty Mind. I love that album.
It's a great record. But when he puts out Controversy, that's kind of when Prince blows up. That's when people are like,
True.
"Oh man!"
Absolutely.
The mainstream starts to find him. Yeah, Controversy was a big hit. And what was that? That was 81. Yep, the year I was born.
Yeah, I have a nice bootleg Controversy 12-inch single, which is kind of cool. I sent it over to Wes to check out. But yeah, I remember when I first heard that, and I went. I think I went down to Sound of Market in Philly or downtown Trenton, and picked up the 12-inch copy, and I asked for it, and the guy's like, "Well, yeah, I got one," and it was a bootleg copy. So at that point, it was kind of like a cool thing, not as much of a big deal now, but it's like, oh, cool, it's a bootleg copy, and I took it home, and I was like, and again, the first thing that hit me was just such a unique sound. Like I said, it wasn't like anything else that was out at the time.
Definitely.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was definitely ahead of its time. I mean, you can argue that record kind of shaped the decade almost in a lot of ways. Prince basically. I mean, like we were talking about genre bending. he basically took R&B and made it a whole completely different thing. It's almost like there's certain artists that you can almost just classify as their own genre. There is a genre that you could call Prince funk. There's
For
a lot of
sure.
imitators where you can be like, oh, all right, yeah,
Yes.
so that's some Prince funk.
It sounds like a band. I got some Prince funk on me.
But you know what I mean, though. Like you when you like when something else comes out, that tries to sound like another popular artist, and you're like,
Yeah.
I always go back to it. And since we have to mention the band on every episode, Matt, it's like I always joke that like Weezer rock became a genre in the '90s when there was all these bands that wanted to have like clever, goofy rock songs that they sound like they wrote in their dorm room. It was Weezer rock. There was Prince funk.
Yeah, definitely, man.
Don't put them in the same. Don't put them in the same sentence, there, John. Come on, now.
No. It's not what I.
It's parallel.
I know. I'm only kidding.
It's just like a thing that happens. It's like it's Sabbath metal. When you think of like the dirgy type, slow dirgy metal. It's Sabbath metal.
Now, I can't think of a better way to segue into talking about Prince's sexuality than talking about some Prince funk. Because that's another thing that you might get on you with Prince's sexuality. Go Prince funk. So, I mean, obviously this is a huge deal with Prince, at least in his early days, maybe not in his later days. But,
right.
I mean, you could just look at a still image of him. And it's just beaming sexuality from that era, like those early days.
Performing in his bikini briefs. That's it. That's all he would wear.
My God. I mean, it was marketing.
It was funny because you had him, and then you had Rick James fighting as to like who was the most raunchier. Rick James never did it for me though. I was a Prince guy all the way.
I was a fan of both.
One hell of a bass player, though, man. My God, he is one hell of a bass player. My friend Lila bought me a Rick James live DVD as like a gag birthday joke. It was like when the Chappelle skit was like the biggest thing in the world.
What did the five fingers say to the face? What? Slap.
And I remember one night I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna drink some beers and watch this Rick James DVD. And I was like, oh shit, this is kind of awesome. Like this is amazing. That man is a hell of a performer. I was in. No, but I mean, I definitely team Prince all the way. But man, no disrespect to Rick James, man. That guy was awesome.
And my favorite thing about Rick James, and I was a Rick James fan as well, but my favorite thing about Rick James was my favorite female singer of all time was Tina Marie, which he did a bunch of stuff with her. Yeah. And I just love Tina Marie. She's like my favorite. And a lot of the duet stuff they did together was just ridiculous. Her voice just always gave me chills. Just my favorite female singer of all time.
But it felt like Prince and Rick James were in competition with each other. Like not only like who is the most raunchier, but Rick James was trying to do an all-girl group. He came out with the Mary Jane Girls.
Mary Jane Girls, sure.
But then Prince threw out Vanity Six.
Vanity, yep.
And because Nasty Girls was all over the place at that time.
Well, the Mary Jane Girls did well with, In My House. And, they had a couple other lesser hits. But, yeah, they absolutely were going back and forth.
I mean, that just rises up your level, right? That's like East Coast and West Coast rap in like the 90s. Like you got a rival, but it's with sexuality instead of like.
Well, listen, rivalries help both sides. I mean, as long as you're producing, they usually do. I mean, think about it. You remember both.
Another thing that was a controversy with Prince was he was publicly criticized for not participating in We Are the World session. This, I mean, I think I was younger when this happened. I barely remember, but this was Michael Jackson's coming together, right? He had like brought a bunch of artists together to do that.
Right.
Song.
Oh, I remember that. I remember that big time. He, like you said, it was a Michael Jackson thing. He got all these, celebrities to come together and sing. the We Are the World. Prince didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it, and they crucified that man. But the funny thing is, like we talked about Musical Genius, he made a song about it. And it's called Hello. And on the song, he tells him, he's like, I tried to tell him that I didn't want to sing, but I'll write a song for him instead. And that's like the opening line to the song.